Hi, Steph. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. So this is Steph, not Stephanie Brown, but she told me to call her Steph. So for the rest of the conversation, she is Steph. You're a Massachusetts hairdresser who focuses on color, and you're a member of the BTC team. And it looks like you're a Cosmoprof ambassador. Anything else? Any other accolades
Hi.
that I'm missing?
So those are definitely my major ones. And on top of that, I'm a full-time hairstylist. I love creating content, and I just feel very fortunate to be in this industry.
You're so good at creating content. The cool thing about content, and this is maybe just so obvious to the audience, but I'm going to say it anyway. The cool thing about it is that everyone has their own personality as part of what they're creating, right? And I peruse your content mostly through Instagram, and it's just so there's just so much of your personality that comes out, and it's just good and it's just entertaining. You're so educational, and your personality comes out, your voice comes out, and I see why people like it. And so for the list, I'm going through this not to butter you up, because I don't need to butter you up, but just for the listeners to understand who may not know you, um, really encouraging everybody to go to your Instagram, Vivids and Balayage, and check you out. But it just, I've been doing these episodes for 7+ years. I think we're actually, let's see, I started in August of 2017. So I'm
That's
actually
amazing.
heading towards 8 years doing this, and 400 plus episodes. And I've seen a lot of hairdresser, accounts. And I just love the fact that everybody kind of has their own thing. And so anyway, that was just my impression as I spent time with you on your account. I literally felt like I was spending time with you as I was going through your content.
I've definitely used that as a tactic on a way to attract my desired clientele. I actually started at Supercuts, which I always tell people that I know it's known for like chop cuts, quick haircuts, but I always say that when you find the right boss, and my boss definitely set me up for my career in terms of she was always super honest. She kind of encouraged us to draw inspiration, not to just do haircuts. And I met actually some of my best friends there. So that's kind of why I stayed for so long. I definitely had a good time. And then I realized there was so much more to life than doing men's cuts. But a perk of that was so many stylists don't know how to do men's cuts and they're scared, and it's like a major loss of revenue. So I definitely think it's a good place to start. But then when I went more full service, I was like, okay, there's not a million people walking through the door. What can I do to get a clientele? So that's where I
Mhm.
kind of really dove into social media.
Okay, so I want to go back farther than that, and then we'll pick up on that story. I love that, but I don't want to miss out on how you got into this business in the first place.
Okay, so I was never a great student. I think I graduated with like a 1.8 GPA. And it's actually funny because the other day I was doing a client's hair and we were talking about like one of the true crime cases that I'm super into. And she was
Mhm.
like, "You should be an attorney." And I was like, "Girl, my GPA was 1.8." And this girl's dying laughing. She goes, "I didn't even know you could get that low." So I was
Oh my
always
gosh.
like a
What?
chatter.
Uh-huh. Social.
So yeah, very social. So I knew I didn't want to go the college route, which back then in 2008, when I graduated, it was very frowned upon to not go to college, especially in the town that I grew up in. So I actually,
Which is are you from Massachusetts originally?
I am like a little small town, Hopkinton.
Hmm. Hmm.
So my parents weren't super thrilled, but my grandmother actually owned a salon, but she was very like into perms. I think her haircuts were like $9. So she was like, "This is gonna be like she used to call it a labor of love. So she was like, just be prepared. Like it's a lot of work. So I went to college for 2 weeks, a community college, and I was like, I'm going to cosmetology school.
And that was it. And so that, I mean, that path makes a ton of sense. So when you got to cosmetology school, were you, well, by that time, had you done any hair? Had you done your friends? Had you done kitchen, bathroom hair? Nothing?
No, not really, because since my grandmother's salon was, I hate to say it, but like all older ladies,
Yeah.
I was always kind of known as like her granddaughter. So I don't think anyone wanted me touching their perms.
Very funny.
Um,
All right. So
so
you go to
yeah,
cosmetology school, and were you, what was it, an immediate click or not?
no, no, actually, like all cosmetology school, I struggled. I was like, okay, am I going to be doing pin curls and roller sets? Like, I don't know if I can do this. I definitely thought I made a mistake. And then once I graduated, they kind of just throw you, you go through like a week of training and then they put you right on the floor. And even then, people do not believe this when I tell them, but I used to cry in the middle of haircuts because I was so afraid to mess people's hair up. That was probably for my first like year and a half.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's not uncommon, not uncommon. And I love for these stories because we have a lot of people in cosmetology school listening to this podcast. And I want them to know that it doesn't have to click immediately for them to have a promising future.
Totally. And honestly, I think sometimes the harder you have to work at it, the more rewarding it is. And then later on, you can help others.
100%. And that's part of this conversation. I mean, that part, this is helping others. This is part of that. You know, you're telling your story where it's not all a straight line, from lower left to upper right, all heading in the same direction. There's bumps along the way. Okay. You, uh, so you kind of figure it out. Um, and then I guess, right? And anything else, any other little lessons from cosmetology school experience?
Kind of just know that what you're doing in cosmetology school does not equivalent to what you do in the actual real world. Like, I definitely think it's time to update the test.
And that's so insane. And I know we're going back to 2008, I think you said. And maybe there's some cosmetology schools now. Here we are, what, 17 years later, that have kind of advanced. And I obviously there's been a lot of changes since then. I mean, there's changes in state regulations that require certain things, like texture education is now required in certain states. And I know that there's certain cosmetology schools, Paul Mitchell School, Tony and Guy, and other schools that are more expensive, maybe more advanced, and trying to connect the dots between how do you pass the exam for the state and how do you go into a salon immediately afterwards and be able to actually service a client effectively. But
It's
I
definitely
suspect
difficult.
that a lot of cosmetology schools have not connected those dots yet.
I always compare it to like they're getting you to pass the MCAS of the hair industry. I don't know if MCAS is like worldwide.
I don't know what that is.
It's like a standardized testing in Massachusetts to basically pass high
Okay,
school.
right.
And that's kind of what hair school is.
Yeah, right. And then so you connect a little bit of a dot, maybe a halfway dot, but you don't connect the important dot, which is when you get into the salon, how are you going to make a career out of this? How are you going to make a living out of this? That not only pays your bills, allows you to save, and allows you to enjoy yourself. And that's really the important dot. And I know that a lot of cosmetology schools don't yet make that connection. So you definitely experienced that. And so how did you had to connect the dots yourself? And how did you connect that dot? Did you go immediately into Supercuts?
I did. And I do think that honestly, that was a great place for me to start. I definitely needed additional training. Like I said, doing anything hair related did not come naturally to me. I grew up in the era of like pin straight hair. You would flat iron your hair like 4 times a day. So I really didn't have, I didn't even know like which way to turn the curling iron. There was a lot that was missing. So I started there and I think they gave me a really great foundation. However, I would say, and I give this advice to like anyone that I speak to on social media or anyone who takes my education, don't stay there for too long because personally, I think it puts you in a box. They're very structured. You can't do certain colors. So I would say get your training in there, create relationships, and then move on if that's what you desire. Or some people would love to just do that forever.
Hmm. Hmm. And so you talk about the structure, and structure is phenomenal when you need it, and then it's as you grow, ideally, the evolution of anything, and especially a hairdresser, as you grow and you mature and you learn, sometimes that structure could get to the point where it's holding you back, and you need to, let's talk about the metaphor of a plant, right? The roots of the plant grow, and they grow outside of the constraints of the box, that the plant is in at the nursery, right? And sometimes you need to remove yourself from that confining box, and then you need to plant yourself in some fertile ground. And so here I am. I'm so poetic today. Look at me. I'm like
Look at you.
philosophical. I have metaphors just oozing out of me. All right, so the nursery, the Supercuts was the nursery, so to speak, and they watered you, and as a budding tree, and they kind of trained you to stand up straight and blossom. And then at a certain point, you didn't need those constraints and the boundaries, and so you left. And I imagine that the amount of time, how much time did you spend there?
I was there for almost 8 years.
Wow. Okay. So that kind of supports your. Now I see why you made that comment about it. You were probably there too long. Would you say you were there too long?
Totally.
Okay. So
Definitely.
your roots were kind of pushing on those on that box that you're in. Um, so what would you how would you advise any listeners who might be, in a situation that has a lot of support? They're in a salon, or, they're with a group or whatever that has a tremendous amount of support, which is the good part, but also constraints, which is kind of the other side of that same coin. How would you advise somebody to know when it's time to leave?
I would say at a certain point that you feel comfortable if you had to be in a sink or swim situation in a salon, because when you go from a salon with having tons of support, whatever way that support's coming in, and then you go to, let's say, like a commission salon where it's more laid back, you definitely want to feel prepared knowing that there's going to be some things that you need to do on your own versus when you come from a corporate or a place that has hardcore structures, it's going to feel a little different. So I think if you can imagine yourself feeling confident doing that, and also like a back step on that, when I left, there were so many services that I didn't know how to do. And I feel like that sink or swim mentality kind of ended up helping me out a little bit in the long run.
You weren't taught to do them, and maybe not allowed to do them, right? You made a
Correct.
comment. I suspect, I understand historically that Supercuts doesn't have, obviously it's not a full service salon. I know it focuses on dudes who don't want to pay a lot of money for a haircut, stuff like that.
Yep.
But I imagine that you recognized and you saw on Instagram and or YouTube and all these amazing services that were probably fascinating to you, and you were annoyed that you couldn't do them. So that was another indication that you needed to kind of leave the nursery and go out on your own. Okay, so how did you actually? So you're there for 8 years, and you were probably jonesing to get out of
Yeah.
there. And so you finally did. And what was that like?
It was honestly really hard. I do not like change. I felt awful leaving my boss, who was just amazing to me for 8 years. And obviously, we had our tiffs like anybody else. But it was kind of just like I was feeling super unhappy. I didn't like the scheduling. I felt like I was missing a lot of personal events, whether it be like birthday parties, just anything. And I kind of felt like I chose this career to be happy and make other people happy and obviously have fun. And it just kind of wasn't feeling that way anymore. So I had made the decision to put my 2 weeks in. And the way it works there is they like basically, if you have any little bit of like requests or clientele, they basically, I was done that day. Because they don't want you taking your clients with you, which I totally get that. I don't know if things have changed nowadays with anything like that, but it was a little bit, I felt bad leaving.
Yeah, sure. After that amount of time. Now, really quick about the missing birthdays and such, that it's an employment situation, right? I mean, they employ you on an hourly basis. And were you getting any commission or was it just like 12 bucks an hour?
I think it was like $12 an hour, and I'm pretty sure I was making, I think, $24,000 when I left there a year.
Which is obviously you can't even buy yourself
Unlivable.
coffee. Yeah, unlivable and in expensive places like Massachusetts or California or any of the others. It seems like almost everywhere is kind of expensive these days. But okay, um, so very very difficult to make a living at that, and that's the way they kind of structure their business. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just at a certain point, if you're a hairdresser with skills, it doesn't make any sense to stay there. And so you don't like change. You stayed there a while. Okay, so where'd you go when you left?
So I went to a full service salon after that, completely different atmosphere. I absolutely loved the owner. We're still super close. She treated me like family, which is funny because I always see stuff on social media that says like, if your salon calls you family, it's toxic. I don't
Mm,
wholeheartedly believe that because she was always fabulous to me. But everyone was on
sweet.
commission. There was a lot of not, there was some older women there. So it was definitely an adjustment. And it was kind of like they would book you, whatever, and you were taking it. And I quickly realized I cannot sit here all day and do one blow dry a day.
Got it. So you were sitting there and there wasn't enough activity, weren't enough clients.
Yeah. Yep.
So how long did you stay there?
That was so actually ended up being there for 7 years.
Oh my God. You really don't like
Um,
change, do you?
no, but I'm very grateful for that part in my life because that's where I started to establish on social media.
Okay.
And now I'm out on my own working at another salon, but I rent the chair, and that's been amazing, a total whirlwind, definitely a learning experience.
hmm Okay, so hold on. So all of that downtime at your 7 year salon, your second salon, allowed you to work on your Instagram.
Yeah. And she was so supportive. There would be days that I would
That's
be like, I
awesome.
want to be famous on Instagram. And she'd be like, you're going to do it, girl. Like, make those videos. So it was awesome.
That that's cool. But I imagine you weren't making a lot of money. I mean, if you weren't doing that many clients and it's commission, that could be really troublesome, right? Because you're not. I mean, you didn't have an hourly, right? An
No.
hourly wage.
And at one point I had said to her, like, I love working here, but I think I'm gonna have to go back to an hourly salon because like I just can't afford to pay my bills. So she was like, why don't you do some assisting? And I've always been interested in like numbers behind the business, social media, just kind of like I've always been into photography. So I always was kind of helping her out along the way. And
hmm
then I started Instagram. And this was like back in the day when you would post the pictures of the hair like coming out of each other, like back to back in the collages.
hmm
And it kind of just, I started to learn how to like, you know, maximize my posts on trying to attract clientele, I took a liking to doing girls who were like 20 to 25 because then I would see that they would post my Instagram to their stories and then their friends were coming in. And then I was like, okay, like I love Instagram now. And it kind of just
Yeah.
evolved from there.
Okay. And so this was happening towards the tail end of the second salon, or this was happening when you went to the booth rental station?
This happened probably like 4 years into working at the last salon I was at.
Okay. Okay.
And
So
it was
you,
interesting.
yeah. So you got really good at building a clientele. Did you have to get the 20 something year old girls? Did you have to like lower your prices or anything? Because sometimes they're not making enough money.
I did a lot of free services, and I know that's controversial in our industry, but I always say it comes back around to you tenfold. There were clients that I would do for free, and now they're paying me today. And I think things like that go a long way for spreading the word. They're posting it on their social media. It gives me experience because I still wasn't totally perfect at doing those services.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it makes a lot of sense. It might be controversial, but it works, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know how controversial it really should be. And I mean, the number of hairdressers who have built their clients that way, or the list is very, very long, in my experience. So, yeah, if
And
it
I think
works,
a
it
lot
works.
more
So,
salon owners should look into doing that. And I even tell any new stylists that come to our classes, I'll say, if you're an assistant right now, ask your boss if you can bring models in, have your model cover the cost of the color. And I know that it sucks working on your days off, but you're going to get all of this content, and this could lead to literally filling your books.
it's building your business. It's an investment, right? It's an investment of your time. And that's what a hairdresser has, early in their career is they have time to invest. They might not have money to invest, but they have time to invest. And so that's why it makes a lot of sense. Okay, so that was working for you. Okay, so then you move to a chair rental situation. And is that where you are now?
I am, yep. So we have been there for a little bit longer than a year.
Okay. And it's working?
Yeah, it's honestly fantastic. It's a lot of work. And I can see why people say that sometimes leaving a commission salon to go work for yourself doesn't always work out. I think personally it's working for me just because I feel like I can categorize into buckets of things I need to do. But I can see why people love working at commission salons.
Totally. All right. So, how are you splitting your time these days? Because I know you're not just behind the chair. I know you're behind the chair a lot, but I know you're not just behind the chair because you're extremely active on your content creation. And some brands have noticed, and we here at the Hair Game podcast have noticed. So, here you are doing a podcast. You're not behind the chair doing a client. So, talk about how you split your time these days.
So I work 4 days a week behind the chair, sometimes five if I need to squeeze people in. I think also going back to like kind of my earlier days, I always tried to be fairly accommodating to people just because I know like life happens. I'm the oldest of six kids. So I just feel like things happen, kids get sick. So I don't keep a firm cancellation policy. I also struggle with anxiety. So I feel like I understand that like life. Um, so I've tried to always be accommodating throughout my career, just in general, even though if I lose money on the back end of that, again, I feel like it's just a nicer thing to do. Um, but I feel like it's been great. And so I do the 4 days a week typically behind the chair. And then every morning I wake up, start to edit, kind of type my captions. So that's like usually like 5 days a week I'm doing that. And then I take Sundays off usually and kind of just have that be my day. And the other 2 days, I'm usually like on meetings, editing, kind of trying to like think outside the box of what my next plan's going to be.
Hmm.
And yeah,
Yeah. It looks like you post just about every day, maybe every other. Well, no. I mean, you're pretty much every day. I mean,
when I
you
first
missed a couple
started,
days, but what's that?
when I first started, I would post 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. And kind of as I've got a following, I've tried to make my videos better, and therefore it takes longer to edit. So I've
Yeah.
really been posting sometimes, usually once a day, but then there will be weeks that I'll take a few days off. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you'll have like 5 days in a row, and then maybe you skip a day. But I mean, more or less, it's pretty much every work day that you're posting, which is very impressive. And your videos are not just you holding the camera there behind your client's head. I mean, you like you just alluded to, you definitely edit, you definitely put time in, you have captions there, very educational. That was the one thing that I got from your page is it's very educational, and I could see why, you know, you're some of the brands have wanted you as an ambassador because your audience on Instagram is getting value from your posts. And one of the reasons I led this conversation with how good your Instagram is. So um, you're putting real work into it, and it looks like it's paying off.
I love Instagram, and I always say I know that it's overwhelming. Same with TikTok, but I feel like once you see what it can do for you, you're like, oh, I want more of that. And then you kind of start
Yeah.
to become addicted, which is it's obviously can be not the best. But I think that if you're not using social media in 2025, you're missing out. Even if you post 1 time a week, like that could be one client.
It's just part of your job, isn't it? As a service provider, it's just kind of part of the job, and it boils down to how what kind of career do you want? Do you want to be making that next level of income? Do you want to be you know, honing in on the kind of client you want, in your chair and all those other things that we talk about all the time that everybody knows about. Instagram is a great tool for it. And, you said you're addicted to it. I think this is like a good version of addiction. I think, you're addicted to being productive, with a highly productive tool that supports your business. And that's really, really great. I obviously the bad part of addiction on something like Instagram is if you just sit here and scroll cat videos or whatever, for that kind of goes in the bucket of entertainment. If you're addicted to it for silly entertainment and you're spending 6 hours a day looking at cat videos, nothing productive about that. So
No.
that's going to cost you. So I think you're doing great here. You also educate. So how often, like in person? So how often are you doing that?
So that's definitely something I'm newer to. I have been doing that usually during the year, not during summer because I love summer. Um, I'll try to do like one class a month minimum. And this is something that I kind of want to dive into more next year. The first year of me being rental versus commission was definitely like, oh my God, I have to go to the hair store and then I have to respond to all these clients. Like, how am I gonna book the or write my presentation for this class when I have to work a million hours. So now that I've kind of gotten into a groove, my goal is in the future definitely more education classes.
Okay. So let's kind of go back to that transition to being an independent and having to reply to clients like you just said. Have you delved into different technology tools to kind of make it easier for you? For example, like online booking. Like all of a sudden you have to book yourself, right? Maybe before there was a front desk. Now you have to book yourself, and there's lots of tools out there to do so. Have you delved into that yet?
So I do have online booking, and I think also having people be able to reach you on social media has helped. I know that can be a double-edged sword because they're messaging at all times of the night. But I've tried to tell all of my clients, here's my online booking. It's open 24/7. If you book it and I see that something's incorrect that you booked, I'll reach out to you. So that's been a really positive tool to have is the online booking for sure.
Okay. Anything else that you've kind of found that's helpful in your transition to independence?
I think being prepared, knowing that it's not going to be always like sunshine and butterflies. Um, just knowing that like you are going to be doing everything. There's no one to help. Let me rewind that. Not that there's no one to help you, but before I had an assistant, if something went wrong, I had a manager, the owner of the salon, the receptionist. So it was definitely interesting in that aspect, but I really do think the online booking really helped me out.
Totally. And of course, you can get an assistant now. When you feel like your business has gotten to that point, maybe it requires a little bit of altering your schedule, maybe booking more people at the same time or whatever. Um, yeah, have you considered that?
So one thing I've been loving is kind of just spending time one-on-one with my clients and kind of slowing it down a little bit. And I think that's where the luxury of social media has come in because I know that I have another income or a few from the social media on the side. And I think
Mm.
that it's honestly like elevated my game behind the chair because I'm not like, oh my God, gotta book this haircut so I can pay my rent. Whereas I'm like, okay, I'm gonna deliver my clients like the results they deserve. And it's okay if I'm booking a few less people because one, I'm recording them to post on my social media. And I feel like that's kind of filling that gap of me not double booking.
Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure your clients 100% appreciate that. You're elevating your service, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day, the experience for the client. Talk about pricing. How have you changed your pricing from when you went to the commission to now as an independent?
So I'm actually going to be raising my pricing within the next few weeks. Nothing crazy. I just, you know, haven't raised them in a year. I try to do a yearly or a little bit over a year. I try to do a yearly update. The salon I came from had a structure in place where if you were a certain percent booked, then you would move up to the next level. And I've noticed in some of the classes we've taught that if you're not constantly raising your prices, even the slightest, you end up falling behind. And then you're kind of too far behind. And it's like raising them just $5 isn't going to do anything, but you can't raise them 40 because then you're going to lose clients. So I feel like these are just things I've learned over the years to kind of like stay with the market, stay with your demographic, and you know, when you're putting out the work of what your prices are and your clients feel like it's worth it, they'll still stick with you.
Absolutely. And this is something we've been talking about for a long time, especially the last 2 or 3 years, since inflation has reared its ugly head, like real inflation, right? So we had, 2 to 3% inflation kind of through the 20 teens, and then COVID, and then boom, right? With like 7%, 8% inflation, with a lot of consumer like grocery products and stuff. We've seen 10, 15, 20% inflation. And so you just kind of have to keep up with the economy. I mean, the nature, the value of our currency, which loses value every year, to the tune of these days, let's call it 3 to 4% per year. If you're not increasing your prices by about that, then you're making essentially less money. You're making the same dollar amount, but that dollar amount is buying you less. It's paying for
Totally.
less of an apartment. It's buying you fewer groceries at the grocery store. All the things, right? It's buying you less of a Netflix subscription, right? Which used to be like $7 and now it's like $18, right? And that happened in like five
Insane.
years, right? So it's to keep an eye on what's going on around us and recognize it, not in like a high anxiety way. Oh, we have to worry about it. We have to fret. Just recognize it and recognize that this is just very common and has usually been this way across history. So I think our industry, the data that I see, we've gotten better in the last 3 years or so. We've gotten better at having good kind of inflation adjusted price increases. So, good on us. Unfortunately, not all the clients are have been readily accepting of it, um, which I think is just a hangover from the client's experience going back 20 years. And look, I have conversations with my dude friends who are like, pay more than $40 for a haircut? No way. I've been paying $40, ever since I've been an adult. And I'm like, okay, well, that $40 buys you half as much at the grocery store as it did 15 years ago. So how can you sit here and tell me that it makes sense that you should still only have to pay $40 for a haircut, right? Some consumers believe that their haircut or their hair service or whatever should continue to be the same price because that's what they experienced maybe for the first 10 years of adulthood, since they started paying for the hair services themselves. Before that, their parents paid for it. And so it's kind of training the clients. It's training the consumer, which can be a frustrating experience for us in the beauty industry.
Absolutely. And I think that so far, like many of my clients have been okay with my price increases. It was actually interesting. So when I worked at Supercuts, I think the haircut was 14.95. Um, and then if you wanted a shampoo, I think it was like $3 more. And so many people didn't want the shampoo because of the $3. So then when I
Yeah.
went to the next salon, my haircut was 45, which I was like, oh my God, no one's gonna pay that. I had a lot of people, or not a lot, but in my mind, I had a lot of people follow me that I thought would
Yeah.
freak out. So
Right.
I think that when you show your worth, and I've always been willing to meet my clients in the middle, like now my haircuts are $88. But it's also been like 9 years later, which is crazy going from like $15 to 88. But you're also getting a shampoo, a blowout, and then if someone maybe doesn't want a blowout, I now offer a wet cut price. And anyone that gives me pushback, I feel like I'm kind of very friendly with my clients in the sense of they'll say something sarcastic like, "Oh, who do you think you are? Like a rocket scientist?" And I'm like, "Well, clearly I am if you're in my chair." And kind of make it like you can go anywhere, but you're still here because you like the way I chip into your sides. And if you go to somewhere that's charging less, you're probably not going to have your sides chipped into.
Right. 100%. And this reminds me of the 4 SWs, which I talk about now and then, but maybe not enough. Some will, in other words, clients. Some clients will, some clients won't. So what? Someone's waiting. And so there's going to be clients who are not willing to pay $88. There's the clients who are willing to pay you $88, and those are the ones who continue to come to you. As far as filling the gaps with new clientele out there in the public, there's going to be some people who aren't willing to pay $88, but there's a lot of people who are willing to pay $88 who want what you have to give. And so your job is to find those people. It's to put yourself out there in the places where those people are so they can find you. And this kind of like, ties a bow on this conversation where you've done a good job on Instagram of being where those people are who are willing and able to pay, you know, $88 for a really great service.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that obviously in this economy, which is so funny saying that, like the other day, one of my clients was like, she has three kids in this economy. So it's just like kind of a funny saying. But I
Yeah.
do always try to say, like, if people give pushback, explain to your client, not exactly like what the hair color costs, but for an example, one of my clients who's been with me for a while, she was like, I can't believe you charge that. And I was like, I have to pay for my health insurance, my building rent, which this isn't something I put out on social media because I think when you sometimes I see some things that are like kind of crazy, which I wouldn't be putting on social
Yeah.
media. But when you
Agreed.
have a more personal conversation with your client, then they're like, I didn't even think of that. Like, I didn't know that you had to pay for your health insurance. And then it's kind of not so much like, oh my God, you charged me $88. And it's kind of just like, that's what a business is.
That's what a business is. Exactly right. And it's unfortunate that you have to have that conversation, such a basic, common sense bit of information that you need to give your client. But it's great that you're able to do that, with your personality and your relationship with the client. You're able to do that in a good, kind, soft, informative, fun way, and remind them that you're a human too. You know,
Yeah.
um, and it's frustrating to me always when I see, in California, we love to increase the minimum wage and things like that, and everybody's like, yes, fast food workers should be making $25 an hour, right, from $15 an hour in 1 year, and they should be able to do this, they should be able to do that, and then when a hairdresser tries to increase their price $5, that same person who was saying, yes, fast food workers should be able to make 20, that same person is like, you don't need to make an extra $5 for this service that takes an hour and a half. And it's like, wait, what?
It's so true.
People have this kind of perception about what others should be earning, and except when it is going to affect what they pay,
A
right?
thousand percent. I see it all
So
the time.
it's you see it all the time. So it's good to remind them. It's good to remind them. Um, and and I, and I don't want to discount the pressure on the consumer. I think it is important to recognize general pressure on the consumer, that and prices have gone up, like we've said. There are certain other elements within kind of the consumer experience over the last 2 or 3 years that are super annoying. So I understand the pressure on the consumer, but you as a hairdresser, me as a consumer, all of us in the beauty industry, we're also consumers who are receiving the same pressure of inflation. So why should we suffer the consequences of having to absorb all of these increasing prices without increasing our prices to an inflationary degree, right? And so that's kind of what it boils down to. So I love the fact that you said that about reminding clients that, hey, you're also a person in this economy, you're a small business, and you're just trying to keep up with expenses.
Totally. And kind of another thing that goes back to social media, I feel like, so the area I live in, it's very suburb. We're about like 45 minutes away from Boston. And it's kind of just like, I feel like your average, maybe like a little bit higher middle class, but mainly middle class. And I feel like there's a lot of blue collar workers. And I think specifically in this area, because so many people take the train to the city to work, if you didn't go to college, you're kind of looked down upon. And I don't know if
Mm.
that's kind of like a world or a countrywide or worldwide thing. But I feel like the moment I got on social media, it almost helped my value behind the chair.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, first of all, Massachusetts, obviously, maybe not obviously, but it is a center of higher education in the world, right? You got
Yes.
MIT, you got Harvard, you have some of the institutions of highest renown there. So And also I think last time I looked, one of the highest percentages of people with graduate degrees and upper level education. So not surprised at all that you're experiencing that. I'm not so sure you're going to find that quite as much in other parts of the country. However, you're talking about your credibility as a professional, and doing as well as you're doing on Instagram has given you that credibility as a professional. And I think it's just another reason why it's worth being addicted. And I'm doing air quotes for the listeners, not the watchers, but the listeners. Air quotes. Why having an addiction to being productive on Instagram is 100% worth the investment.
Totally. And for like the newer stylists, I think a lot of the ways you word things on Instagram, people want things that are in demand and also people that are in demand. And I think it's kind of like a natural habit that if you seem booked, people are going to want to see you more because they're one, like, oh my God, she must be good. She's booked. And
Oh
two,
yeah.
I think it's just that natural, like, I want what I can't have. So I
Mhm.
feel like making that kind of known in a humble way on social media also makes people want to either follow you, book with you, take classes from you. So I think that's also like another tool.
That's definitely next level. That's next level branding and credibility creation and reputation building and all of that kind of stuff what you're talking about there. And it deals with social proof. Social proof is kind of this I don't know if it's like psychology or whatever, but as consumers, sometimes we are if it seems like something is in high demand, that's called social proof. In other words, we think, okay, well, all of the other people in my social network, want this one thing, and that one thing must be really good. So
Yeah.
if you can create, a sense of social proof for your services as a professional, I mean, the power of that is enormous. So how do you do that? How do you do that how do you do that? This is actually a question for you. How do you do that, with your page?
So I think going back to offering the free services, and that also will help you. I always say this too, try to not niche yourself too much too early. Because, for an example, I made my Instagram name Vivids and Balayage. I basically do neither of them now. But at the
Oh,
time,
really?
I, I mean, I do Vivids more for fun, and I do more of like foilage versus balayage. If I could go back, I would totally change my Instagram name. But at the time, I thought I was going to be in Boston, like painting art murals that like look like people's hair. So at the time, it was a great name. So
Funny.
I feel like offering free services to not only show your work, but to figure out more what you love. And I feel like when you're doing it for discounted or free, you kind of have more free reign. So that was definitely something that kind of got me going. And then I also feel like when you have one video blow up and it will go crazy for no reason, that can do so much for you. So I feel like kind of going in that direction with, you know, using Instagram to make yourself seem more, I don't want to say more valuable than you are, but kind of like back up what you're doing in the real world.
Yes, you're showing value. Whether it's more valuable than you are or whatever, it really is, the essence of it is you're showing your value to people. New potential clients, they're going on there, they're seeing it. Oh, she's an educator. Oh, look at how she's educating other hairstylists. She's putting all these little like captions and lines on this client's head in order so other hairdressers can learn this technique. She's an authority, really. That's what it boils down to, isn't it? Like she's an authority for this particular service, and she must be really great, so I'm going to try her. I think that it boils down to that, and everybody can learn from such a thing. I think these are great lessons.
And also showing yourself more because obviously there's a million hairstylists in the world. And especially in my area, there's like, I think maybe 10 plus salons in the town I work in, and it's like really not that big of a town. So I feel like connecting with people on a personal level is so important these days. I've really kind of gone into that in the last like 2.5 years, getting comfortable, like showing my face, talking. I know that every time we teach, people are like, I just hate hearing the sound of my own voice. And I'm like, girl, trust me. Like, I get
Get
dragged on
used to
social media for it every day. And
it.
it sounds so cliche, but I always say, like, haters are your motivators because it's so true.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. No, you're doing a great job of it.
Thank
All
you.
right, if I handed you a wand and Queen Steph waves this wand and you can change anything about the industry at all, what would it be?
I think it would be, and I even am waving this wand at myself to be more authentic in the sense of I come across as this like super powerful person on Instagram, very confident, but I struggle with everything that everyone else does as far as like mental health, balance. And I feel like sometimes it's hard to talk about that on social media, not because I don't want people to know it, but it's just kind of like finding the place to share that or put it on my
Right.
feed. So I think just
Right.
more realism.
Is right. I love that you said that. Where uh kind of where's the threshold where it becomes valuable for you to express that? And not necessarily valuable to you to express it to your audience, but valuable to your audience for you to express it to them. I think that the general comment that you had that you have self doubt, you have anxiety, and you have concerns, and you have all these things. It's very human. I think it's very common. Who knows where you fall on the spectrum versus like the average person? None of us know, right? Because none of us are in each other's heads.
Mhm.
But the real kind of being transparent about maybe struggles that you have that can be valuable to your audience in the right context. And so only like where, when, how much to share, and in a hope that it's going to help somebody else maybe realize that they're not the only ones that have self-doubt or imposter syndrome or that constant sense of anxiety and of like, oh shit, another day and what's going to happen and all this stuff. So I love the fact that you mentioned that.
And I always say, and I teach this in the social media classes that I teach, which I'm like, this is hilarious because I'm teaching a social media class, but I always say a lot of what you see online is fake. And whether that's because, my Instagram page technically is my business page. So if I'm having a terrible day, I'm not going to go on my stories and rant about it as much as I would love to. I still have to remain professional. I'm working with brands. I've built relationships. So I feel like you said, kind of just finding the balance of like realness and because I am myself on my Instagram page, but I would say maybe not my whole self, and that's probably a lot of other
Sure.
stylists.
Sure. I'm not sure any Instagram should have all of our whole selves on there.
1,000%, 1,000%.
Right? Yeah.
That would be
I
a scary
think
place.
I it's a balance. I think you've struck a nice balance with it. Um,
Thank you.
and then you just kind of have to feel out if it's ever valuable to your audience to mention anything more.
Yeah,
I think that it could definitely be too much, and it's like, oh my gosh, the audience is like, oh, she's. It could feel like complaining, right, about your anxiety and all this kind of stuff, and like I'm not so sure that's in too often it's not valuable and
a
or
thousand percent.
entertaining or informative or helpful, you know, to your audience.
When I do kind of want to fly off the handle on social media, I do try to remember this is my business. So even like the other day was something so simple. I was at a grocery store and I was backing out of the parking spot. And my new pet peeve is when you're like 3/4 out of the way of the spot and someone's walking behind you. And
Right.
it's like, I'm in a car and you're on foot. Like, what do you think is going to happen?
Right.
And I'm going to make a TikTok about like 5 things that annoy me because at the time it sounded funny. And by the time I got home, I'm like, what would that accomplish? Literally nothing.
Well, it it depends how good of a TikTok it is. I mean, there's there's rants kind of ugly and there's rants funny. And of course, it's a very fine line between those two things. I mean, you just mentioning that, I laughed because I experienced that too, and that's also super annoying that you're three-quarters out of the parking space and the person on foot keeps walking because they don't want to wait, the
Yeah.
8 seconds for you to get out of and and of course, that you can, if you have a car with a camera in the back, you can see that they're like on their phone, they're not even watching, and you're like, okay, I'm about to kill this person, maybe they should put the phone down and recognize, that it's a dangerous situation. So I mean, it's funny, so as long as you
Yeah.
can execute, this piece of meme content, in a funny way versus like an ugly ranting way, then it's gonna be funny.
Yeah. So things like that.
Hmm. Hmm. So you do have good videos like that, by the way. I've talked about your educational videos and stuff, where your personality comes out, but your personality comes out especially on your kind of meme videos, and you like sprinkle the salon mostly meme videos throughout your page, which is fun.
I try to do that just to kind of keep it fun. And like my new way of trying to attract clients is now that my books are full, I'm kind of going for more like people that I actually mesh with personality wise, people that might want to make a TikTok, people that will let me record their hair. Because not only am I like loving being behind the chair, eventually I want to start like my own private education, whether that be virtual or more in-person classes. So I'm just kind of trying to see like what newness I can attract just by showing more
Yeah,
funnier videos.
totally. No, I think it's great. Do you have any hair horror stories that you can share with us?
Oh my God, I have a couple. So probably my first one was at Supercuts, and honestly, still till this day, cutting a very blunt bob, I think is like one of the hardest things to do. And this girl had super long hair, and I was always the chatter. And I think a lot of times it's just to like ease the awkward silence. Like I will chat to you about like what your grandma's doing later. So we're chatting away. She had super long hair and she wanted like a little bit above the shoulder of a bob. So I'm like cutting away, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh shit, this is getting so short. And she looks up in the mirror and she goes, oh my God, my hair is so short. It was probably to her chin at this point. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, hold on. Did you say, oh my God, it's so short, or did you think, oh my God, it's so short?
I was thinking that, like
Okay.
panicking and trying to like win her over with this conversation because I knew it was bad.
Oh God.
Um, so she looks in the mirror, she starts crying, and then my
Oh,
boss comes over, I'm crying, and she left with a very, very short bob.
oh my God. Did she let you finish it at least?
Oh no, no.
So a very short, half finished bob.
Yeah, so that was really, really bad. And obviously that like regressed any progression I've made.
I'm sitting here thinking, who goes into Supercuts for kind of a transitional haircut into kind of a medium length bob? Like that's, and I know my listeners are thinking the same thing, but, and I don't mean to sound like a snob. I mean,
It's
obviously,
so true.
Supercuts has great things, and we have good hairstylists at Salon Republic who came from Supercuts, and their careers have advanced amazingly, and they've been very successful. But I don't know, that seems very optimistic as a client to go in there for that kind of a service.
Yeah, even looking back, like some of the people that would come in for corrective color that at the time I didn't even know what that was. I'm like, why would you ever go to Supercuts for
Right?
that?
Well, you tried and you learned, and I'm sure that you learned from that experience and probably haven't made that mistake again.
No, I haven't. And still to this day, when I'm cutting a bob, I'm like, okay, you need to focus. And because when it's at that length, you can see everything.
Yeah.
Um, so I still kind of am like slightly traumatized from that moment.
It's so funny. We had a good Bob horror story in years, I want to say. Most of our horror stories are like, chemical horror stories, right? So
I've
that was a good one. I like
definitely,
that.
I've had like, this was probably 5 years ago. I let this girl process for way too long. I was double booked, and I had never seen hair that was so melted off. Like, I thought that there was like a malfunction with the lightener. And I'm at the stage
Amazing.
just pulling out clumps and clumps. And there used to be this guy that works there, and he was like, okay, like, convince her to flat iron her hair. And I mean, I still do her hair till this day.
Oh, that's
But
great.
it was not good at all. And
Yeah,
it was just
no.
kind of a learning lesson.
God, it seems like almost everybody's had that experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any last words for the community?
No, I think that I'm so lucky to be part of this industry. And I think that I always say whatever you put in, you get out. So if you want to work 20 hours a week and that's it, you're gonna probably have a 20-hour a week salary.
Yeah, absolutely. Wise words. I love it. Thank you, Steph. It's so great talking to you.
You too. Thank you for having me on.